Welcome to the East Ward Update. This month we'll be talking about 8 transportation projects in the East Ward. I'm Durwell Montgomery, and this month I'm joined by the city's Director of the Department of Transportation, Toneq McCullough. So great to have you on today, Toneq.
Thank you.
Won't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Toneq McCullough, and I'm the Director of the Department of Transportation. I've been with the city now for over 16 years. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, but I've lived here in Winston-Salem for over 20 years now. I've got 2 young kids, Quentin McCullough and Alicia McCullough.
Okay. We got a lot happening around transportation in the city of Winston-Salem, and in particular, as we look at the East Ward, there are a lot of things that are taking place and happening. Things that deal with transportation, particularly some of the infrastructure things we'll talk about today. Oftentimes, many people kind of glaze over the fact of all the work that has to go into the process of developing and working to get to the things that we use each and every day. And some of our transportation needs are a lot of those items that sometimes get overlooked. But kind of want to highlight some of the things that are happening in the East Ward and just give some folks some updates on what's happening and going on. One of those in particular is the Salem Creek Connector. What is that?
The Salem Creek Connector project is a project that the North Carolina Department of Transportation is working on to bring some improvements to our roadways. It's a roadway that will be 1.1 miles connecting from Martin Luther King Jr. Drive just south of Winston-Salem State University's campus. And it will connect over to Rams Drive just across from the Research Park Boulevard. It will be a 4-lane roadway. So it will handle a lot of traffic that typically may use Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, which will be able to connect directly to US 52 from Business 40 and connecting you over to the southern end of MLK Drive.
Is there a timeline on this project that NCDOT is working towards?
Yes, NCDOT anticipates having the project completed by the summer of 2016. If you're riding down US 52, you will see that there's a lot of earth movement going on, bridges going in, so the public can actively see that there's a project happening, and it should be completed by the summer of 2016.
Is this project in any way connected to any of the other things that are happening and going on?
Yes, it's connecting to the Business 40 project. The Salem Creek Connector project was one of the projects identified with the Business 40 improvements to be completed before the actual 2-year closure that's anticipated for Business 40. So yes, it's connected. But one of the other things that's of significance in the East Ward, with the closure of some of the roadways or the construction on Salem Creek Connector, it has impacted some of the residents on Williamson Road. So some of the things that we've worked with NCDOT to help relieve some of the pressures of the one-way in for the neighborhood off of Williamson Road was to put in that traffic signal at Williamson Road and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. That is a temporary traffic signal. Once the project is complete, then the residents in that neighborhood will actually have 3 ways out of the neighborhood. They'll actually be able to continue to go out at Williamson. Deeks Road will connect to Salem Creek Connector with a traffic signal, and that will lead people out to Salem Creek Connector, which will go either to US 52 or they can go back to Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. And then some of the back roads like Olson will connect to Vargrave Street, which will connect up to Waughtown Street. So there'll be 3 points of exit from the neighborhood once that project is complete. And I thought that was significant to talk about in this ward.
Yeah, very much so, and no construction project, whether it be on a building or roadway, is without some issues that come up, and surely in terms of changing the dynamics of a neighborhood in terms of how they enter and exit.
Exactly.
Is a major thing, and so we're happy that both the city's Department of Transportation and NCDOT were able to come together to help as best as possible alleviate some of the issues there. And then when it's all done, I think we'll all be proud of what has taken place and the product that comes from this hard work.
Definitely.
And so you mentioned that this is tied to the larger project that's taking place with Business 40.
Right.
And this is one of those items that were to be completed prior to that time frame. What's happening with the Business 40 project?
The Business 40 project is a project to improve the bridge structures and the roadway structure on Business 40 between 4th Street and Peters Creek Parkway. So the bridges over and under Business 40, they will all be replaced within that area. Most of the Business 40 will actually be more of a deep cut, which means the road will be lowered. So any of the bridges that are actually currently going under Business 40 will now go over Business 40. There were also some discussions about the alternative of using Liberty Main or Cherry Marshall as the major access. And I think April of this year, NCDOT, with the support of City Council, recommended the Cherry Marshall option. And that option means that Cherry Marshall will be one of the main access points for the Business 40 project.
And with the timing of this project, how do we envision the timeline for Business 40 project?
So Salem Creek Connector will be completed before Business 40 project begins. The Business 40 project is anticipated to be let in the fall of 2016. The first portion of that project will include improvements at the Peters Creek Parkway ramp or interchange. There will also be some other roadway improvements throughout the community to help with the potential traffic impacts for having Business 40 closed for 2 years. So within a year and a half of the project, then Business 40 will be completely shut down. And all of that traffic that currently travels on Business 40 will now be on the surface streets in Winston-Salem. And that closure is anticipated to be no more than 2 years. Of course, with the way that the project is designed and potentially constructed, that period could be shorter, but the time frame is set for no more than 2 years. But one of the things that, one of the ways that it impacts the city specifically is that the city has the option to include some enhancements to some of the bridges that will be constructed. Enhancements can include anything more than the standard NCDOT bridge, which is typically a concrete structure. So we're working jointly with the Salem Creek Connector community group, not Salem Creek Connector, I'm sorry, Creative Corridors Coalition, to determine some enhancements that could be incorporated on the bridges. There are some pedestrian crossings that will also continue to go across the project. So we're working with them to bring some of those enhancement possibilities to City Council for consideration.
And these are major things when you think about bridges and think about those type of enhancements as being able to be a part of the process in the beginning, and that forethought from community and community leaders, I think is something that is going to be very exciting for us to see what comes forward and how it's able to be put together. When we think about the improvements to Business 40, also those are much needed improvements that we see, and we can see the need for it. Even probably driving, you can probably see some of the needs there, even if you're not an engineer of any sort.
Right.
But as we look at the impact, transportation has had many effects in different ways. It's been able to unite and it's been able to divide, just depending upon how they've worked. And I think Creative Corridors, some of the work they're doing, I think we'll have an opportunity to try to help pull together pieces of our community through some of these projects that we see coming forward. But also in the meantime, as projects are going on, just like what we saw with the Salem Creek Connector project, there can be some growing pains associated with that. Mm-hmm. And surely a closure for up to 2 years is going to be something that's that people are going to have to get used to for that time frame. And I know back when the project was really in its early stages, and some of the community input that took place for the project itself, and debating whether or not it would be a temporary closure or a full closure during that time frame. And so then came back to the recommendation in the process that it be closed for 2 years. Now, it'll be important to make sure that there's that continued conversation and dialogue with community, because I'm sure there are people who probably totally have forgotten, as much as it's been in the news, as much as there's been this consistent conversation, that have totally forgotten that there's going to be this closure that's going to come forward. And we hope to work very much in partnership with the state NCDOT to make sure we're raising that conversation and dialogue for community.
Yes, yes, and NCDOT realizes that it's going to be a significant impact to the community, and they've actually hired an individual to work with the businesses that would be affected by the traffic changes, but we'll also work with the city very closely to make sure that if there are any significant impacts or things that we need to incorporate with the project, to make sure that we have an opportunity to have those things included. So it's been a very close partnership with them, but like you also mentioned, with the community groups such as Creative Corridors, to make sure that the end product is something that we're all very proud of.
Definitely, definitely. We have another project, the Union Cross Road project, which again is another NCDOT project that's being done and worked on. What are they doing there? There's been a lot of dirt moving, a lot of things happening in and around that area.
Yes, Union Cross Road, that project will widen 4.2 miles of the existing Union Cross Road for within Salem, within Kernersville, from Sedge Garden Road north to I-40 just south of 311. It includes constructing one of the first diverging diamond interchanges. And I mentioned the diverging diamond interchange, which will be on Union Cross Road at I-40, but we will also have a diverging diamond interchange at the Salem Creek Connector, on the Salem Creek Connector project. So this is a change in our traffic patterns also, where motorists will be driving on the left side of the road for a period of time and then merge back over to the right side. But the purpose of the divergent diamond is to eliminate or reduce the number of traffic signals necessary and to move the majority of traffic with the least amount of impact to including more traffic signals. So I think it's going to be an exciting time for us all over. One of the impacts from Union Cross Road, one of our neighborhoods included the Pecan Ridge neighborhood and Pecan Lane, and Pecan Lane was actually closed for a period. So a lot of the traffic was moved to Solomon Drive,
Mm-hmm.
and the Solomon Drive impact then caused us to have to implore some traffic calming on Solomon Drive, and I think that has helped with reducing the number of vehicles that actually use the road now, but it's also reduced the traffic speed on the road, which is another way that we get involved in these projects, even though they're NCDOT projects. It demonstrates how it's important for us to continue to be involved, because whether it's an NCDOT road or a city street, the traffic impacts are always coming to us to help the neighborhood figure out how we can make it a little bit better for them.
Definitely, and you said something there that is oftentimes of a large conversation, that debate when we get calls from citizens, whether
Mm-hmm.
they an issue with a road or street, and we have jurisdiction over those roads that are city roads,
Mm-hmm.
and not as much as those that are state roads. But we do have great working relationships with our state folks who have a regional office here,
Mm-hmm.
who help navigate those issues. But it's not as easy as if those roads were in our control fully.
Right.
But we're still able to work, and then there's sometimes different standards of being able to do certain things on a city street as it is compared to a state road.
Exactly.
And so sometimes it's always an educational standpoint sometimes to see those, because there's no signage that tells you this road is a city road or this road is a state road.
No.
They all look the same.
Yes.
And so we often just have to navigate that and try to get to the end result that is best for the community and the citizens at the end of the day.
Yes.
And in doing all of these projects, we get to one in particular where where we're seeing a project that's focused on in increasing the aesthetic appeal of a road, and that's on the Martin Luther King corridor,
Yes.
and the enhancements that are taken there. Tell me about that.
The Martin Luther King Jr. Drive Streetscape project is a project which will include some enhancements such as landscaping, improved pedestrian crossings, maybe some improved lighting, but it also was a project that we've worked closely with the community to look at ways that we could maybe incorporate some art into the corridor to help tell a story about the neighborhood itself. So with the streetscape project, while we may not actually place any art in the corridor, we're actually including some structure improvements so that there's a base for instance, a statue, or if there's a need to put a banner or something, whatever the community decides that they want at particular intersections. We're actually including some structure basis for those so that the community can later come back and add those things. The MLK project actual design started with coordination with the Creative Corridors group, but also with a task force of community leaders to come together and talk about what they want Martin Luther King to look like from US 52 up to Business 40, just south of Winston-Salem State University, ending right there near Excelsior Street at the Union Station building. So, like I said, it will include landscaping and enhanced landscaping, maybe some fencing to help control where pedestrians are crossing along MLK, because safety is always a primary responsibility of our department. But then also including some pedestrian level enhancements so that the crossings at various intersections will be a little bit more enhanced than they are now. The crosswalks, maybe some increased pedestrian signals at the crossings, but also the artwork, or incorporating some type of artwork in the crossing itself. So it's a pretty large project for us, and significant project, I think.
And within this time frame, what are we looking at from a timeline? No, we have moved forward with the partnership that we have with the Creative Corridors in doing this project as well. And so how are we stand in terms of kind of looking at when can the community begin to see some of the work being done with this project?
Because we're actually using federal funds and there's a long process of approvals, the community probably will not see any construction beginning before a year to a year and a half from now. We were in the initial stages of actually getting the contract agreement with Creative Corridors, because Creative Corridors is contributing 10% of the funds, which would be of the local share. They're contributing 10% of that local share, and the city's contributing the other 10% of the local share of the federal funds. And so we needed to negotiate the contract agreement with Creative Corridors. And then the next step would be for us to proceed with the actual design. And that's where we are beginning that design, so that we can have something a little bit more detailed than the initial feasibility study, which was completed, to show what the final project would need to be look like, but also to move towards construction drawings so that we can actually get it constructed. But whenever you're dealing with federal funds, the process includes reviews of those designs and approval of those designs through our state office. And of course, anytime you have additional reviews through every phase of the project, that takes a little bit longer. So construction probably, again, will not begin for another year to a year and a half.
And with this project, we see the additional enhancements that are happening, and the community is going to be able to see very clearly these enhancements, and from throughout the corridor there on Martin Luther King. But in November of this past year, the voters went to the polls, and they voted to set aside some dollars through bonds for additional improvements, enhancements via resurfacings and sidewalks, yes. Which again opens up the door for additional dollars to be spent to touch areas that are a little bit more in need. And I know some ask the question, well, these are one-time dollars that come through the bond that are spent in these areas. Yes, that's true, but then there's also dollars that we set aside on an annual basis in the annual budget to deal with street surface resurfacings and sidewalks. So this really just gives that bump to kind of tackle more areas, right, and meet some of the additional need that's there.
Right.
And so tell us a little bit about the bond projects we have from resurfacings and sidewalks.
The bond resurfacing and bond sidewalk projects are projects that we've identified and throughout the city, but in each of the wards, trying to, since we had so many bond dollars available, it's the time that we can actually address some of our larger streets that typically we have to break it up into smaller portions. And so what we presented to the community and approved were for resurfacing, we're actually going to let it in 3 separate contracts. So the first contract we've actually let and council approved just last month in March. So this the contractor should begin work this month. And in the East Ward, there were 3 roads in particular that we will be resurfacing: Pecan Lane, Winston Lake Road, and Highland Avenue. And then the second phase of our contract, we're letting another contract in June of 2015. But let me go back. The project that will begin in April is scheduled to be completed in August of this year. The second contract will actually be let in June to be completed by December of this year. And there are several more residential streets that we will be addressing. And the list is available online, but it's also being shown on screen. And then the third contract we will be letting in March of 2016 for completion of August of 2016. And there are about 10 or 15 additional roads that we'll be doing. In between letting all of the bond resurfacing contract, we will also be letting our annual resurfacing contract, which includes another set of roadways that we've not revealed yet because we're working on approving that list. So there will be a lot of resurfacing going on. Hopefully it will improve roadway conditions for our motorists. One of the calls that we get a lot has to do with speed bumps and really just roadway, not speed bumps, but potholes, and really just the condition of some of our roadways. And so we were very excited about having the bonds approved so that we can address a lot more of our roadway conditions to help improve it for our motorists. The other would be the bond sidewalk projects. And the bond sidewalk project, we allocated a certain amount of funding in each of the wards. And in the East Ward, I think there are 9 roadways that we initially had on our previous sidewalk list to be included and put sidewalks in on the roadways. And they include roadways like Chandler Street and Gerald Street, which are projects that will be completed before December of 2015. And then there are about 6 other roadways which will be completed by December of 2016 and 2017. So we've got a lot of sidewalk improvements going in, and then we've got resurfacing projects going in. For the sidewalk improvements, before we actually start with any construction, what we want to do is actually meet with the residents that will be affected by the sidewalk project. So on any of the roadways that we've listed within the project limits, we will have a neighborhood meeting at a neighborhood, either one of the community buildings or somewhere in the neighborhood, to talk to the residents to make sure that there's some consensus about which side of the road we put the sidewalk on, but also to give the residents an opportunity to talk to us about any potential impacts to their property. If there are trees that we think may need to be relocated, or any landscaping or anything like that that may be affected. Questions about how we will replace their driveways are always things that come up. And so we want to try to have these meetings to help make sure that we address a lot of those concerns in the beginning, but also to allow the residents to meet the person who will be leading the project, so that as the project moves forward, they will know who to contact directly and not have to go through other sources.
Right. And it's always better to get the input on the beginning than to have, in the middle of a project, have issues and concerns that could have been addressed if they were heard in the beginning process. So it's always great to have that citizens' input and that community input, especially when it's something impacting their immediate community. So I think folk will really appreciate that process that's in place there.
Yes.
Recently, we've had some incidents here in our community, which sometimes rings the bell to kind of always ask the question, what are we doing around safety of children, safety of individuals as they're in our roadways, on our sidewalks, in our community. We have programs that we work towards to make sure we we have safe areas for everyone as they're looking to access transportation or just walking and using our infrastructure. So tell us a little bit about the child pedestrian safety that we do here in Winston-Salem.
Our child pedestrian safety projects came out of our Safe Routes to School program. We've got a bike and pedestrian specialist who works very closely with our neighborhood schools to determine infrastructure needs for children who may be walking or bicycling to schools. And so they go into the schools and they determine the number of kids who are actually getting to school that way. They actually walk the routes, ride the routes with bicycles, and determine what infrastructure needs may exist. And so those infrastructure needs, when they're identified, they go on a list for us to consider for future funding. When the bonds were approved, some of the funds were allocated to what we're calling our child pedestrian safety projects. And there are 8 projects that we identified. We identified projects in each of the wards. And in the East Ward, we identified projects at 12th and Cameron Street and 14th and Cameron Street. There are a lot of children who are walking along Cameron Avenue, I think it's actually, Cameron Avenue. And by putting in some high visibility crosswalks, putting in a pedestrian crossing signal at 14th Street where there's an actual traffic signal there, and putting in some pedestrian crossing signs and some improved ramps in the area. One, it calls more attention to the intersection with the high visibility crosswalks, which helps make it a lot safer for the children to walk. But with the ped crossing at the traffic signal at 14th Street, it also will help make it a lot safer for the children crossing the street there. So that's one of the projects that we identified in the East Ward. That project will actually, it's one of our projects that will start within this year. One of the things that we're doing when I talked about community impact, even with our child pedestrian safety projects, we will have meetings with the community to introduce to them the improvements that we plan to incorporate and to just get their feedback and make sure that we're not, because sometimes we see things from one perspective and we want to make sure that we're not putting something into the neighborhood that the neighborhood one does not support, or that they're not things that we should have considered that we didn't consider before we started moving forward with the project. So within the next 3 to 6 months, we should have these meetings with the community to introduce them to this project and get their feedback before we move forward with the actual construction.
Again, I think citizens' engagement is one of the greatest ways, one, to spread the word about some of the things that are happening, but then also to help to alleviate any potential issues. Although sometimes, no matter how many times you meet and have some discussions, there are going to be some things that come up. But
yes.
I think that community input and conversation always helps in terms of being able to get the opinion, get the thoughts, hear some of the concerns, and then in ways, if there are ways to help move around or reshape what we're doing to make sure that we don't have some of those issues, it's always good to hear those up front.
Yes.
One of the last things that we have going on, and it's a big change and a big impact, is what we've been seeing happening with internally and very soon, and even maybe right now in terms of what's going to happen from a public standpoint of the conversation of a real comprehensive analysis of our bus routes, which will move to make some significant changes in some areas in terms of how the routes go, making them a bit more efficient and effective in some of the areas that they travel. So tell us a little bit about this process. How do we get there, and then where are we now?
The comprehensive analysis was, the whole purpose of the project was for us to look at our bus routes to see how we can better move the riders from where they're wanting to, from their starting point to where they want to go more directly. All of our buses actually are centralized at the transportation center downtown. So anyone riding the buses currently, no matter where they get on, has to go through the transportation center and then connect to other routes to get to maybe another side of town. So we actually, for a year now, we conducted some surveys. We also just looked at the actual current system and users and where the transportation riders or the transit riders are getting on and getting off. And we fully rerouted most of the bus system so that we have at least 5 maybe hubs. So the transportation center will still be our major center, but there will be other potential hubs outside in the community so that if you wanted to go directly to the mall from some sides of town, you can actually connect with the bus to go directly to the mall. You don't have to go through the transportation center. There are some areas, maybe on the north side of town, where individuals may want to go to some of our major stores like maybe Walmart or other shopping centers. So we looked at where the shopping centers are. We looked at some of the medical centers and some of the major destinations of our riders. Also taking into consideration that our primary goal was not to increase the funding to our existing transit center, transit budget. So when we did that, we've identified in the East Ward, there are at least 5 routes which will be affected. And while we have the overall system available and on our bus, on our website, we thought it would be beneficial to come out to the community so that the riders can see how they could potentially be impacted. And so what we're doing is we've got 2 public hearings currently scheduled in the East Ward that will be held at your town hall meetings scheduled in May. And so we'll have staff from our Winston-Salem Transit Authority, but also DOT staff available to just share with any of the riders what the changes will be, but to talk to them directly, to hear from them what they think the potential impacts to them would be, and if there are concerns or anything that they want us to hear before we move forward, then that's what we'll be doing. And so, like I mentioned, at your town hall meetings in May, we will be available to communicate with them what those changes are.
And I know we've made some exciting changes. Even the WISTA has done some things even internally. I think that's going to help when once we've gone through this process and citizens have had the opportunity to participate and have their input in what's happening, what's going on, and within the implementation of some of these actual changes. I know council and committees have talked about the great need that's going to have to take place in terms of the education piece. But one thing I think that WISTA announced maybe earlier this year or last year in reference to some of the things that you can do even now in terms of knowing when some of the buses are going, the online pieces that you can have, and how you can even get messages and text to your phone to let you know if your bus is close or if it's getting ready to get to your location. I think these are a lot of things that as we continue to improve those items, I think is going to hopefully have a great impact in terms of increasing those discretionary riders, those individuals who have other means of transportation but may not take the public transportation one because they don't see it as the most reliable means of transportation in terms of they have to wait longer than they would have to if they could get in their car or other means of transportation. By having these more efficient routes, more direct routes, they get to the destination without having to go downtown to the central place. It's just a much more efficient place.
Exactly.
And then we want to be both efficient and effective at the same time. And I think that's the goal, and I think that's what staff has looked very hard at in this process.
Yes, yes.
And so as we see this, we've looked at Salem Creek Connector, we've looked at the Business 40 project, MLK projects, the Union Crossroad projects, we've looked at the bond projects, the child pedestrian safety projects, and then the bus analyst. Did I miss any of them?
No, you did not.
So there's a lot. There's a lot
There's
happening.
a lot happening.
So there's a
Yes.
whole lot of work for our transportation department in terms
is.
of what's happening on top of the daily things
Exactly.
that come up. And so we're so grateful for you and your leadership there and the work that your staff does every single day for the citizens of the city of Winston-Salem. As I started in the beginning, oftentimes infrastructure are some of those things that we just don't think about because we get in our car and we drive on our roads every day, or we'll walk on our sidewalks with really no thought of what did it take to get this to be where it is. And so we're very much excited about what's getting ready to take place in our community, what's already happening. Citizens can see it from different parts and different vantage views of the community, of the dirt turning, the things that are happening around. And so when they're completed, I think we're going to be a better community because of it.
Yes.
And more connected in that same process. So again, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today all of these great projects that are taking place.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. You can learn more about city transportation projects on the city's website, www.cityofws.org. You can see this program in its entirety on the city's YouTube channel, Winston-Salem Gov. For Toneq McCullough, I'm Daryl Montgomery.